Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to our first workshop. I want to, first of all, unofficially, because it's not an official meeting yet, welcome Edward Abram. I believe you're on the call. I see you here.
I'm here. Thank you.
Committee. As we have an official meeting, when we do have an official meeting, we'll go through the introductions once we get officially appointed to them.
Great. But it's good to be unofficially welcome. Thank you.
I'm Dan Iglesias. I'm the vice chair, acting as the chair tonight. We are going to have our workshop format, and this is something that that was passed at our last in-person meeting. The idea of a workshop instead of a full meeting is that we can still exchange information without having any action items. We're not going to have any, we're not able to on a workshop forum have any kind of motions or votes, resolutions. So tonight is just strictly to go through an informational type item. I'm going to read you some of the rules as we go into this. This workshop is being held virtually and is being recorded. If you experience any technical difficulties, please contact Lisa Juan. The phone number is on the screen there, and her email address is on the screen, so that as a member of our technical support team may assist you. All attendees will remain muted throughout the duration of this workshop. If you wish to provide a comment, please use the raise hand button. The chair will first acknowledge you, and then your microphone will be unmuted. Please proceed by first providing your name, agency represented, and then your comment. Your microphone will remain unmuted until the comment has been fully addressed. In compliance with all applicable rules and regulations, no actions or motions shall be permitted. Discussion will be limited to matters listed in the published workshop agenda. Permissible discussions include presentations, questions and answers, comments related to the presentations. Any committee member deviating from these guidelines will be reminded of these limitations on such discussions. Please hold your comments until the presentations are concluded. What I'd like to do is just go around the room real quick, and I'll just, so we understand who we have on the call, because it seems like we have a lot of people here. I'd like to know whether you're on the CTAC committee, whether you are a consultant, whether you're presenting, or if you're part of the public tonight. So I don't know the easiest way to go around, but I can go through the names that we see here. Edward Abram, we realize you're coming on.
Right, coming on to the committee.
Francesca Taylor.
Hi, with DTPW, presenting this evening on the Bus Express Rapid Transit Network.
Thank you. See Jasmine Johnson. Benjamin Hendricks.
Hi, I'm here for CTAC.
Okay. Shireen Yufang.
Yes, hi, I'm with the Florida Department of Transportation, the District 6 office.
Thank you, welcome. Peter Halliburton.
Hi, yes, so I'm with Cambridge Systematics and a consultant to DTPW, working with Francesca Taylor, and here to make the presentation this evening with Francesca.
Thank you. Victoria Williams.
Good afternoon. Hi, yes, I'm with FDOT Turnpike, and I'm the liaison to the TPO from the Turnpike. Thank you.
Thank you. Lawrence Young.
Good evening, Lawrence Young with the Miami Downtown Development Authority. Just joining in the call.
Thank you, welcome. Yvette Holt.
Hi, Yvette Holt Communications Consultant to DTPW, working on the Bert Network that's being presented tonight.
Thank you, welcome. I think I got it. Is there anybody else that I did not mention?
No, I think you got everybody.
Thank you. Okay, great. So we'll jump right into what we have. The only item we have on the agenda, which is the Smart Plan Bus Express Rapid, known as the Bert Network. And we have Francesca Taylor presenting. We'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the CTAC. for your time this evening. As stated before, I'm Francesca Taylor with DTPW, and my colleagues with me today are Peter Halliburton and Yvette Holt. We are presenting to you the Bus Express Rapid Transit Network, or BERT Network, which is a network of express bus routes to provide point-to-point service throughout the county. And it is part of the SMART plan, the Strategic Miami Rapid Transit Plan. Before we get into the presentation, I do kind of want to give you all the option. We are the only item on the agenda for today. And we really wanted to focus on the bus on shoulder operations that will be happening for a few of the beach routes, the routes that will extend to the beach. So I want to ask if you would like for us to focus on those particular items, or if you would like us to give you the full overview of the network, all 8 routes. So at your...
Are you able to do a little bit of both? I know some of our members are interested in the beach corridor for sure, but a lot represent the rest of the county. So can you give an overview?
So we can definitely do a little bit of both. I just wanted to make sure that we are speaking to your interests. So definitely. Okay. All right. So we can proceed to the next slide. All right. So as you can see on this slide, the BERT network is a network of 8. Well, it's actually 9 routes. The map on the right shows our BERT network. They are the colorful lines that really extend the SMART plan to points south and west. And of course, we have connectors from the beach that connect to the east. As you'll see on the legend, there is a flagler corridor that is part of the BERT network. However, that the study for that corridor is actually being managed by FDOT, the Florida Department of Transportation. And so for this study, we're going to be focusing on routes B through F3. DTPW has started studying these routes and the implementation of these routes as far back as March of 2019. And as I mentioned, they are for point-to-point services to major origins and destinations. We'll be using majorly existing infrastructure, so existing expressways. We'll be using a bus on shoulder operation that we'll talk about a little bit more later. And we'll also be using transit signal priority. So all of that is to really help us maintain travel time reliability. It'll provide limited stops to major origins and destinations, and we'll talk about each of those for each route. And the frequency for each route ranges between 10 to 20 minutes. So using the expressways and the shoulders and the transit signal priority will help us with that frequency. We also in this study included a analysis of existing parking rides, existing and proposed parking rides, so that it can support the network. So we'll review all of those items in today's conversation. Then on the next slide, you'll see our first route, which is the Southwest Miami-Dade Express. So it extends from Southwest 344th parking lot all the way north to Dadeland North Metro Rail Station. We do have interim stops at the Heft at 288th Street, Heft at 211th Street, and the Heft at 152nd. This route will be using the managed lanes in order to connect from north to south. And the service is anticipated for 2021. On the next slide, you should see on this slide, we're showing the Southwest 152nd Street improved parking lot. So this is an existing parking lot. We'll maintain the entrances and exits at this location. Right now, we propose that we'll have about 194 spots. Keep in mind, this is a conceptual level drawing, so it doesn't really reflect what the ultimate design of the parking lot is, but a conceptual drawing for our study purposes so that we'll understand how much it would cost to improve this parking lot. On the next slide, you'll see another parking lot that will support the service. This is at Southwest 211th Street. Excuse me. This is near the South Dade Government Center. So you may be familiar with that area. So it's right at 211th and the Turnpike. So this is a proposed parking ride lot. So because it's proposed, we had to do an environmental analysis, and our environmental analysis showed that at this point, there are no adverse impacts to the local area. And right now we're proposing about 178 parking spots at this location. Next is the Southwest 288th parking lot. So this is at Southwest 288th and the Turnpike. And it was once a Home Depot parking lot that we are repurposing. We're still kind of doing an analysis on the feasibility of this location. We have done an environmental analysis, and again, we found that there were no adverse impacts to the environment. And currently we foresee about 234 parking spaces at this location. So our next route connects us from the Palmetto Metro Rail Station to the Miami Gardens parking lot. It'll use the 836 express lanes and the I-75 express lanes to connect to the Miami Gardens Drive parking lot. The name of this route is the Northwest Miami-Dade Express. There are no interim stops on this route, and this service actually started in November 2019. It has paused service since we had to do a kind of a realignment due to the COVID pandemic and reallocating buses there. So we do anticipate that this route will come back. We have seen some ridership, but we don't have a timetable on that just yet when the route will start back into service. On the next slide, you'll see Southwest Miami-Dade Express. So this connects the Miami Executive parking ride, the Miami Executive Airport parking ride to Dadeland North. It's going to use the 874 and 878. There are no interim stops again on this route, and service is anticipated in 2023. On the next slide, you'll see that we are proposing a new parking lot at the Miami Airport, Miami Executive Airport, excuse me. And we're still in talks with the airport, Miami Executive Airport leadership, just on the location, but we have done a preliminary environmental analysis. And once again, we found that there were no adverse impacts. We foresee about 94 parking spaces at this location. Next, we have the Florida Turnpike South, which connects Southwest 344th parking lot all the way north to the Dolphin Station parking lot. And that was recently completed just a few years ago. And we have interim stops on this route at the Heft at 288th, at the Heft in 211th, Heft at 152nd, and the Panther Station. So this connects to various areas, in downtown Cutler Bay, and connects FIU via the Panther Station. So we foresee it will be a very useful route for many of our residents. The service is anticipated for this route in 2023. Next, we have the Florida Turnpike North. So that connects Panther Station to the proposed Unity Station. Our interim stops are at the Dolphin Station parking lot and the I-75 Miami Gardens parking lot. This route will use the managed lanes on the Florida Turnpike, and service is anticipated in 2027. This is the furthest out because we're still waiting for some improvements along the Florida Turnpike in order to facilitate this route. Next, we have the Beach Express North. So we're starting to get into 3 of the beach routes, and this is where the bus on shoulder operation that we were talking about comes into play. Before I go any further, I do want to pause and take a moment, take advantage of the time we have here, and ask if there are any questions so far with any of the routes that we've talked about. I think I see a hand with Edward.
Yeah, the question I had was just about the anticipated usage of the routes. How many people you think will be using each of them?
Great question. We will, my colleague, Peter Halliburton, who's on the line, we have some slides coming up that will talk about the analysis behind each of the routes, and we will show you the ridership ranges for each
Okay,
of the routes.
fabulous. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions at this point? Okay, so it looks like we can charge ahead. So this is the Beach Express North, and it connects the Miami Beach Convention Center area north to the Golden Glades Multimodal Transportation Facility. Our interim stops are at 28th Street on Miami Beach, Fontainebleau, also on Miami Beach, Mount Sinai Medical Center, and then the Arlington Heights Metro Rail Station. We're picking up considerable ridership there at the Metro Rail Station. This service will use I-95 express lanes, and then once it jogs onto the I-195, the Julia Tuttle Causeway, we'll actually use a bus on shoulder operation. So that will allow the bus operators to use the shoulders whenever there is traffic in the travel lanes that that does not exceed 35 miles an hour. So whenever the travel lanes are moving at 35 miles an hour or less, then the buses can bypass the traffic and use the shoulder. So the ultimate use or the ultimate route for this service is anticipated in 2023. However, we wanted to fast track this service and provide an interim service in 2021. So in 2021, we'll be using the outside shoulder of the Julia Tuttle Causeway. And then in 2023, we'll be using the inside shoulder of the Julia Tuttle Causeway. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how that may affect some of the cyclists who use the Julia Tuttle Causeway. On the next slide, I believe we show you the Mount Sinai Park and Ride. So this is an area that already has kind of a lollipop stop at the Mount Sinai Medical Center, but we are working to make improvements or working to make improvements so that we can provide more bus bays and parking at this location. So we did do a preliminary environmental analysis here. Again, we found that there were no adverse impacts, and our total parking spaces are about 83 parking spaces. Next, we'll show you the Beach Express Central route. This connects the Civic Center Metro Rail Station to the Miami Beach Convention Center area with an interim stop at the Mount Sinai Medical Center. This service will also use the Julia Tuttle Causeway, and so it is a candidate for using that bus on shoulder operation that we spoke about previously. The service for this line is anticipated in 2023. The next slide shows you, talks a little bit more about the bus on shoulder operation. So just kind of doing a deep dive, and I may cover some points I've already mentioned, so bear with me. But the bus on shoulder operation is used to bypass traffic whenever the through lanes do not exceed 35 miles an hour. So whenever the regular travel lanes are traveling less than 35 miles an hour or less, then the bus will be using the shoulders. This will improve our speed and help us reduce delay. We will have some bus only signs and roadside trailers. We're working with FHP currently so that they can enforce and so that we won't have any copycat scenarios where members of the public are trying to follow the bus on the shoulder. So we will have some enforcement there. Again, for 2021, this year, what we're proposing is that the buses will use the outside shoulder. So that's the right-hand shoulder. This currently is being used by some cyclists. So we're really trying to get the word out and let the bike community know that while we're using the outside shoulder, bikes will not be allowed to use the outside shoulder as well. And so we're encouraging them to use alternate causeways, such as the Venetian or MacArthur Causeway, to cross from Miami Beach to City of Miami. And then in 2023, the buses will use the inside shoulder. At that time, FDOT will have to request through FHWA for reinstatement of the bike lane on the outside shoulder. So that's still tentative whether FHWA will approve that request. I'm gonna pause at this moment. I think Edward might have another question.
No, the only question I had is I go over the I-95 fairly frequently, and there, in addition to the bicyclists using it, the riders, there are also a lot of cars that are parked there as well. I think people go down to the beach or to the water there to go fishing. So it's just going to require increased enforcement. I'm sure you've thought about that. The cars are not supposed to park there, but they're always parked there.
Yeah, that's a good observation. We noticed a lot of behaviors. We've done a few test rides just to kind of test the system out. And, we have kind of noticed, various behaviors, people fishing and biking. So again, we're definitely trying to get the word out now. We've made a fact sheet. We're trying to get out to our bike groups and local community groups. We've met with the BPAC. We're meeting with you all, the CTAC as well. And we've met with some bike groups that the city of Miami Beach has as well. So we're definitely trying to get the word out. And of course, we'll have FHP to help us with enforcement, especially for the first few days of the operations. But good point. So I think the next slide is the Beach Express South. And that extends from Miami Central Station to the Beach Convention Center area once again. It's going to use the A1A MacArthur MacArthur Causeway. And we'll actually have we'll actually have a dedicated bus lane on Washington Avenue and potentially a stop there as well. So the bus on the dedicated bus lane, forgive me, will extend on Washington Avenue from 5th Street to the Convention Center. And that service is anticipated for 2023. So at this point, I'm going to toss over the presentation, and Peter Halliburton is going to take us through the market analysis and the service frequency that you asked about, Edward, and we'll talk about the transit signal priority and some other analysis that we had to do. So Peter, if you're out there.
Okay, thanks very much, Francesca. And, once again, we're in this somewhat unusual position of having a bit of luxury of time. So before I get into this slightly different type of work, if there are any questions relating to the specific routes and park and ride locations that Francesca talked about, we can potentially go back to those now, or I can continue through mine and we can certainly come back to anything after that.
Yeah, why don't we just wrap it up at the end? We'll come back with all the questions.
Great. Okay. Thank you. All right. So as Francesca mentioned, there were a number of steps. There are 5 shown here on this slide as part of our implementation analysis. And the next slide is the first of those steps, the market analysis, which shows this map on the right-hand side, the catchment areas. That's a fairly significant part of this market analysis effort that we worked on. The first step was to develop a socioeconomic profile for each of the BERT routes that looked at the demographics, at the population and employment locations and densities across the county, as well as commute patterns. It's from a different census product available to us to identify the transit propensity for each of these routes relative to each other. So the map on the right shows the catchment area. So the pink circles, for example, those would encompass all the population and employment within that area for folks that would drive to and from the station. Essentially, you'd consider this drive to the station, park at that new, pretty magnificent Golden Glades facility that's under construction, and take the bus south and across to the beach. The second area, polygon within the pink circle, would be the green catchment area. That is for the transit rider capture area. So folks who would take an existing bus that serves the Golden Glades terminal, that polygon kind of captures those people. The third layer down would be the blue circle, and that would be the capture area for folks who would ride a bike or walk to the start of the journey. That case doesn't apply so well to Golden Glades, but certainly the walk and bike capture area is very relevant and prevalent on the beach, for example. So the table at the bottom of the slide then shows the results of this transit propensity analysis. And we've grouped the 8 routes into 3 categories: the highest, then moderate, and lower performing routes in terms of transit propensity. And you can see there that the beach routes, unsurprisingly, show up in the top of that list, and that's really largely relative to the density of population and employment impact on the barrier island there. The next slide then shows what we did with that transit propensity information that we developed, and we used that to seed the model to estimate anticipated ridership that relates to the question we got. So here now the routes are listed in that alphabetical order. And again, there are those 3 groupings. So we've got a column in the table that shows the peak hour frequency. The highest productive routes would get 10-minute peak hour frequency. The next group down would be, that would be the moderate group, would be 15-minute peak period frequencies. And then the third group, 20-minute peak period frequencies. The off-peak frequencies vary a little more in a little more complex manner. That's because of, quite different market conditions relative to each of those routes. The next column in the table shows our estimated ridership range. And so if we go down to route F1, the third from the bottom, that's the Beach Express North, is our most productive route there. We've got, in the range of 8,000 riders per day. Now, that is related also to a high level of service. You can see that we've got 10-minute peak and 20-minute off-peak frequencies for a 19-hour day of service. So that's a very high level of service, but also attracts and generates a great deal of ridership. And that certainly reflects that demand of folks heading over to the beach, largely to jobs over at the beach, with folks originating from the northern part of the county. The final column in the table is the peak period and peak direction travel time. So for the first row there, we've got 75 minutes travel time in the peak period, peak direction. So that would be AM into town from South Dade at a 75-minute travel time. So those are all part of the analytics that we used to generate our service plans and also cost estimates, which we'll come to next. The next slide moves us into a technology element. So, the BERT is the Bus Express Rapid Transit Network. And in terms of the express part, to keep these buses moving as efficiently, as quickly as possible, much of the service is provided on expressways, as Francesca mentioned. But at the locations where the routes exit the expressways and join surface streets, they're going to be encountering traffic signals and encountering delay. And so transit signal priority is a technology currently in use, in South Florida and elsewhere in Florida in the country, whereby, as indicated in the graphic, the bus is communicating a signal to the traffic controller to optimize its travel time. So if the traffic signal is presenting a green signal to the approaching bus, it calculates the arrival time and it will extend that green phase to let the bus through the intersection if possible. There are constraints on those extensions, etc., but it optimizes to achieve that. If the signal is presenting a red bus to a red indication to the approaching bus, it will truncate its alternate phase, its side street phase, to return a green indication to the approaching bus to keep that bus moving. And so that obviously improves travel times, which benefits all of our travelers on the bus. Also, it improves the reliability of travel time for those bus passengers. And then thirdly, it minimizes operating costs for the department because a quicker bus is going to end up, using less service hours and costing less to operate. So that's a great application of technology to benefit our system and our riders. The next slide is a little bit more devil in the details, in the sense that this is listing the locations for which our traffic analysis recommended the transit signal priority. So, for each of our routes, there's a kind of a short list of locations where transit signal priority is to be provided using those strategies of early green or green extension, which I just described. Next slide then takes us to a next step in our analysis work, which is a Title VI equity analysis. Now, this is a federal requirement for investment of this nature to ensure that there are no disproportionate adverse impacts to communities known as Title VI communities that have higher instances of poverty, minorities, and limited English-speaking population, those three characteristics. And that's what's reflected in our three maps here. To the left in orange is low-income population distribution, where the darker colors is higher density of low income. Next one in green is minorities. The next one in red is the limited English proficiency. Again, dark indicating a higher proportion of those populations. So that's a GIS-based spatial analysis, again, using available census data. And happily, the results of our analysis indicated that the communities served by the Bert Network and each of these stations and the catchment areas have actually higher concentrations of the Title VI populations than the county-wide averages. So there are positive rather than any negative impacts to these Title VI disadvantaged populations. So good news for our project and our network. The next slide is related. It's also Title VI analysis related to the physical improvements at the 5 park and ride facilities that Francesca led us through. They are listed on the left there with numbers corresponding to the locations on the map on the right. And so also happily for us, our Title VI analysis here indicated no adverse impacts from these projects, where that analysis was focused on noise and air quality impacts. Those tend to be the most common for a facility of this type. On the other hand, construction is a necessary evil, in a sense, necessary phase to get to the projects and the infrastructure we want. And we do anticipate some minor impacts during construction that include traffic, air impacts, noise impacts, noise and vibration impacts. However, the county and its contractors building these facilities have to and are used to mitigating these temporary impacts using strategies accepted, nationally and by the state of Florida, et cetera. So those will be minimized and avoided to the extent possible during those construction phases. The next slide brings things together. It's my final slide, and gives you a little bit of a snapshot of various elements of each of our 8 routes. So third column across is the estimated implementation year. Francesca covered each of these in her overview for each route. As she mentioned, the northwest route already began service in 2018, although it had to be interrupted. We anticipate initiating interim service on the Bert Beach Express North route this year, 2021, as well as the South Miami-Dade Express, the top line. Now, of course, it's a changing environment that with COVID, all of these things have to be monitored at all times. So that's sort of an ongoing discussion at the department. We will hopefully see them show up soon, but there are various obstacles. The next column, total buses, that is the equipment needed to provide these services based on those frequencies that I described, as well as the travel times and the cycle times, for one bus to get back to base relative to the frequency of service results in the count of the number of buses for each route. And then we've got the costs to provide these services. The first of the cost columns is the capital in millions of dollars. So you can see that sums to almost $70 million, and that's based on an estimate of $900,000 each bus. Pretty expensive items these days. The next column is the annual operating and maintenance cost for each of these routes, based again on that service plan, the frequency of service, and the cycle time to provide service, and that sums to $27 million as an annual cost. The next column is the capital cost for those 5 park and ride facilities that we've gone through with the description of each one. So that concludes my summary of the analysis work that supports the maps and graphics that we showed relative to each route and park and ride facility. And so the final slide is contact information for our contact folks, Francesca Taylor, who you heard from a bit earlier, and also Yvette Holtz, who's on the line and is our public information officer. So that's it for me. I will turn it over to Francesca, and we look forward to any further questions that you have for us.
Thanks, Peter. I think I see a hand up from Edward.
Yeah, I had 2 questions. One about the transit times during peak traffic periods. Those are using the shoulders of the road and everything else here, the lights and every modality to try and facilitate the speed of these lines?
That is correct. Yeah.
Because it's quite long for some of these.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other question I had was just about the size of the parking lots. I guess those are based on ridership, or you must have studied, you know, what you're expecting in terms of the number of people who are going to be parking to take these lines. I was just wondering how you got to the numbers of parking spaces.
Based on the ridership, and then also how many spaces we could facilitate at that site, especially for those that are already existing sites. And then, you know, the footprint for those that are proposed as well. Peter, is there anything else to add to that?
No, I mean, I think you covered it. FDOT has a manual on estimating park and ride demand. And so that was in addition to ridership, as Francesca noted, we also looked at that methodology. It's a resource that's intended to, you know, serve statewide. Miami is quite a different market, as you can recognize. And this is a new service. So we've got, you know, a number of estimates of parking demand, and yet we've also got quite firm physical constraints, right, which is the overriding aspect at this time. It may be that in the future, we can show justification for expanding the park and ride, building essentially structures to provide more spaces. But I think that would be down the line once the demand is demonstrated.
Yeah, no, I understand the physical constraints, the size of the lots, you know, the existing lots, you can only put so many spaces in them. Just wondering, do you think that's going to be enough spaces to handle the need? Because, you know, it's an important component of this for people to be able to park and then ride, of course.
So I think we are in good shape generally with Southwest 152nd Street being the outlier. So generally speaking, closer you get to the center city, the higher that demand becomes. And yet, this is also our tightest site, most constrained, most expensive land. You know, these things work against each other. That is the one that we anticipate has the greatest challenge meeting demand in the short term.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
I'm gonna stop for just a second. We've had a few more members join us, and I see one of them has his hand up, so we'll go to him in just a minute. But just for the record here, Susanna Gorsh has joined us, Alexander Adams and Alan Fishman joined as you all started your presentation after we did introductions before. I do see Alexander Adam has his hand up.
Can I? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I unmuted. Yeah, I guess part of it was following up as far as the number of parking spaces and all. How many passengers? What type of bus are these? Are these accordion buses or regular buses? And are they a bus like a city bus, or are these the ones kind of like more like a Greyhound type bus? I guess is my first question. And how many people does it hold on a bus?
That's a good question. There's kind of a mix between among the routes. There are a few routes that will be using the 60-foot articulated buses, and then a few that we propose will be using the 40-foot buses. We're not quite sure on the technology just yet. We presume at this moment that it may be electric vehicles, but we're still kind of figuring that out, that piece out. So yeah, that's kind of the overview of where we are now. For the routes that have kind of the higher riderships, those are the ones that would have the 60-foot articulated.
So these are more the city buses, not the kind of what I call Greyhound bus or long distance bus type.
Yeah, the charter type buses.
Charter type, yeah.
So, you know, to be honest, we are still kind of investigating what the best options are. So
Okay.
you know, those aren't off the table completely, the charter buses. But right now we're considering using some buses that might already be in our fleet you know, for
Right.
kind of economic conservative, to be economically conservative. So at this moment, we're,
Okay.
you know,
How many do
thinking that-
those hold? How many people do they hold without COVID? I mean, without skipping seats and all.
I can say I can speak to that. Peter, do you happen to
Yes.
know?
It's a person per foot. 40-foot buses have 40 seats, and 60-foot buses have 60 seats. Roughly speaking, you know, they're going to deviate from that slightly, but that's the general market. Now, I would just add also onto Francesca's previous answer, you know, the city buses have a low floor and easy access for folks stepping onto and off the bus, and also a low height for a wheelchair or parcels, etc., compared with a longer distance coach. So that really would be preferable for our case to use a low floor bus. But this planning effort is assuming we want to provide a seat for each passenger to the extent possible, because these are long travel times, longer routes at high speed on the expressways. The expectation is the great majority of folks have a seat, as opposed to standing passengers on you know, a more downtown localized route. So I think we can achieve both goals, like seated passengers on a low floor bus.
So, and that brings up a good point, is because as you were saying, when you have handicap and things, a lot of times when it's a standard curb, like a 6-inch curb, they have to fold the flap, I'll call it, down and all of that. Whereas we've heard other, you know, bus rapid transit, you would have a higher curb where they can, you know, someone can either walk directly into the bus, it's not really a step, or you could ride a, you know, a wheelchair or something directly into the bus. And again, it plays into, if you're already having to take 70 minutes for the route, and now all it takes is 1 or 2 people that either, they don't even have to be handicapped, they may not, you know, they may be in a walker or something, or, you know, they may just be elderly, slowing down, you know, the process. And I guess the other part of it goes back to what was previously said. If you only have 80 to 130 parking spaces and a bus holds 40 to 60, I mean, you're really only talking about 5 full buses. I mean, and then you're tapped out. Now, I know they may not be full buses and all, but it just goes to the point of, it's not a whole lot of service, and especially for the cost. Hold on one second, sorry. My other comment was going to be that the signal priority, do we currently have that on the South Dade Transitway? And because I hope the technology is getting better, because that Transitway we've been talking about for decades, and you know, I still go by there and the buses sit at the light, sit at the light, sit at the light, and we say, oh, they have priority. They sit at the light, sit at the light. So just hoping it has better technology now or something.
Sure, those are great points. So I do want to mention that for the parking rides, we do anticipate that they will have some kiss and ride spots as well. So, you know, there may be cars that aren't there and parked. There may be people that are dropped off. So we're hoping to have that kind of a multimodal, more multimodal facilities to help increase the various types of travelers who might be boarding onto the bus. I do want to also mention that we are thinking kind of long term that there is a possibility for some of the parking lot lots to be, you know, to have transit oriented development pieces, TOD pieces, So that would allow us to kind of maybe build up on some of those sites, but that's kind of a long-term venture as we see the need for increased parking and increased frequency of ridership for those routes. And then for the South Dade, it does currently have transit signal priority, and there are going to be additional features added to the South Dade Transitway to, help facilitate the bus rapid transit for that corridor.
Okay. And I guess my last comment is just, we talk about the bikes and whether they're going to be allowed again on the 195. The real answer there, we need a multimodal path, a multi-use path for pedestrians and bikes that's not on the road and not getting people killed. And over and over and over again, we keep seeing, billions with B's of dollars in highways and expressways and downtown and Turnpike, and we barely get millions in transit and bikes and multimodals. And I can watch TV and the commercials about DOT saying one life is too many to be killed, but that's just PR. Let's be honest. It's just PR, and it's just on TV. When you start putting money where your mouth is, so to speak, is when it really comes down to it. So
I don't mean to put anyone on the spot,
thank
but
you.
I think we have our colleague from FDOT in case you'd like to, Shireen, if you'd like to speak to any of the bike ped.
That's my only comment. So I'm done. That's
Sure.
fine.
I can speak a little to that, to Alex's comment. Yes, we do hear that chatter a lot, that we only focus on highways and we don't focus enough on transit. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I will tell you, Alex, that we do have, we just completed an I-195 planning study. And one of the conceptual alternatives includes a separated shared use path from the Julia Tuttle that connects the city of Miami to Miami Beach. And it looks really promising. We just need the support of everyone so we can get permits to do this.
That'd be great.
Yes.
Okay. I'll also interrupt again. We have our other member, Susan Shine, has been here as well. I didn't acknowledge her before. So all the committee members were here today, just for the record. Does anybody else have any other questions? If you can, raise your hand if you do. In the interim, I'll ask my question. I do have a question about the safety and security at the park and rides. First of all, what kind of cost that adds on to the operations and maintenance, but also what kind of planning goes into it. Like if you're talking about adding on to the Miami Executive Airport, surely a safety and security issue could be raised there for not just the passengers, but also for the facility there as an airport. If you could just speak to that a little bit.
Sure, and I can't tell you exactly the thresholds, but there are thresholds for, how each of our parking lots are built and what that means for our safety and security. For instance, if a parking lot does include bathrooms, for instance, there's typically, manned security at those parking lot locations. So we will take, safety and security of the passengers under consideration. A lot of our parking lot locations currently have cameras or have manned security personnel as well. And, there's no reason to believe that, our new proposed parking lots won't have those same features. So I can't give you kind of specifics on, each parking lot and, how many people or if there will be specific man officers there, but we do have, standard procedures that we use to guide us in how those facilities are secured.
Thank you. I think Jasmine Johnson, you have a question. I believe your hand's up.
Yes, thank you. Hi, good evening. I was just wondering about your or the actions behind any energy efficiency or sustainability or solar panels or anything that might be in that thought process or realm? Is that being considered, or in the future, is that being considered?
That's a good question. Right now, I think Miami-Dade Transit as a whole is really looking towards making our vehicles more energy efficient. So we're starting there. As I mentioned, one of the considerations for the vehicles is electric power vehicles. So we're still considering that. As far as solar energy per se, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. Again, we still have conceptual designs for our parking lot locations. I can't say, specifically that that's something that will be included, but also I can't rule it out as an option. But we are, trying to be kind of innovative as possible, and then also keeping in context our financial constraints. So there's a delicate balance, but we are hoping to definitely. Our first step is addressing our transit vehicles. Were there any other questions? I will take a moment. I think on our presentation slides that we saw today, some of the headers might have been missing from some of the slides. So if it's okay, I'd like to send another copy of the presentation to the CTAC so we can circulate to the members so that you can see the kind of full context of the slides. I think that might be helpful.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. I don't see anybody else with any other questions. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Great presentation. A lot of information. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you all for having us.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and wrap it up. For the members that joined us late again, this new format is because, this is just going to be for informational. When we hold these workshops, we won't be able to pass any action items. We will not have any votes or any motions. So we'll have an information item like what we just had tonight. We'll be able to get some information, exchange questions, but we'll schedule further meetings going forward based on when they need us to do an action item, or we need to pass a motion or vote on an item. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this workshop unless somebody else has any other questions which need to be addressed, and I'll hold it just for a minute to see if there's any questions on anybody. You raise your hand. Okay, not seeing any. Our next meeting is going to be March 3rd. It will be an informational meeting as well, a workshop, unless something changes from here to there. And then if so, then Paul will send us out the notice and we'll be advised that it will be an in-person meeting. So if we need to vote on an item, it will become an in-person meeting. Otherwise, we'll keep these workshops going so we can ensure everybody's safety. All right, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We'll wrap it up.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.